the heart of Chicago, just blocks away from where millions celebrated the bright lights and innovations of the 1893 World's Fair, there stood a building unlike any other. To passers-by, it looked like a hotel, 3 stories high, modern for its time, busy with travelers. But inside, behind its solid brick walls, something unimaginable was happening. Guests would check in, but many would never check out. No alarms were raised, no questions asked. The man who owned that building was polite, well-dressed, soft-spoken. He was a doctor, intelligent, trusted. But that man, Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H.H. Holmes, was hiding a mind darker than anyone could have imagined. Holmes didn't kill in rage. He didn't lash out in passion. He killed because he wanted to. Because he was curious. Because he could. Born in 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, Holmes came from an average family. Nothing especially abusive or traumatic is recorded from his early life. But even as a child, those who knew him felt something was off. He was smart, yes, but distant. He didn't react to fear or pain like other children. There's a story, one that may be more legend than fact, that local kids once forced him to touch a skeleton to scare him. Instead of screaming, he calmly examined it, fascinated. That moment, some say, awakened something in him. As a young man, Holmes studied medicine at the University of Michigan. While there, he began a practice that would define his future, stealing cadavers from the anatomy lab and using them in elaborate insurance frauds. He'd fake a death, burn or disfigure the corpse, and collect the payout. He changed identities often, lied easily, manipulated everyone around him. After school, he disappeared from his past and re-emerged in Chicago in the early 1880s under a new name, Henry Howard Holmes. In Chicago, he quickly found work at a pharmacy. When the elderly owner died under mysterious circumstances, Holmes took over the store and eventually bought the empty lot across the street. That's where he began building what would become his so-called hotel. The construction process was strange from the start. Holmes acted as his own architect and frequently fired construction crews halfway through their work, hiring new ones immediately after. No one ever saw the full layout of the building. It was a patchwork of secrets. The final structure, 3 stories tall, 60 rooms, was a maze. There were rooms that had no windows, doors that opened to brick walls, staircases that led nowhere. Some rooms were lined with gas pipes controlled from a hidden panel in Holmes's office. Others were soundproof and sealed airtight. There were peepholes drilled into walls, trapdoors in the floors, and chutes leading straight to the basement. In the basement itself, Holmes had installed a cremation furnace, an acid tank, surgical tools, and a dissecting table. This wasn't a hotel. It was a machine, engineered for disappearance. And in 1893, during the height of the World's Fair, it became the perfect hunting ground. Millions of people poured into the city from all over the world. Women, especially young single women, arrived in Chicago looking for opportunity, excitement, and independence. Holmes offered them jobs, rooms, security. He was charming, well-spoken, even flirtatious. Many trusted him immediately, and many of them were never seen again. In some cases, Holmes would gas women in their rooms and then carry their bodies down to the basement for dissection. In others, he'd trap them in vault-like chambers and listen as they suffocated. He even sold some of the cleaned skeletons to medical schools and private collectors. He didn't just kill. He turned murder into profit. And still, no one noticed. Not really. People went missing all the time in a growing city. A woman disappears, maybe she went back home. A worker vanishes, probably moved on. Holmes was always calm, always confident. But eventually it caught up to him. Not because of murder, but because of money. In 1894, Holmes was arrested in Boston for a horse theft scam in Texas. While he was in custody, investigators began connecting him to multiple missing persons cases, including that of his former associate, Benjamin Peitzel. Holmes had convinced Peitzel to fake his own death for a $10,000 insurance policy. But instead of helping him disappear, Holmes killed him. Then, disturbingly, he went after Peitzel's children, 3 of them. He murdered all 3. They searched the hotel. What they found horrified them. Bloodstains, bones, personal belongings of missing people, secret rooms, gas lines, soundproof chambers, strange tools. And yet, it was hard to build a clear case. So much evidence had been burned, dissolved, or lost. Many of the victims were never identified. There were no names, no records, just remains. Holmes eventually confessed to 27 murders, but his stories constantly changed. Some victims he named were still alive. Others had no known identities. He seemed to enjoy confusing investigators. Some believed he was toying with them. Others believed he was completely detached from reality. One of the most famous things he ever said came from a written confession. He said, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer." That line haunted newspapers for years. Some people believed he was possessed. Others thought he was simply evil in its purest form. In court, Holmes was calm, even while hearing the details of his crimes. He sat, smiled occasionally, and never once showed real emotion. In 1896, he was sentenced to death and hanged in Philadelphia. But even then, Holmes made one final strange request. He asked to be buried 10 feet deep, in a coffin filled with cement. He said he didn't want grave robbers digging him up. But many believe it wasn't fear of robbers. It was fear of being punished after death. Maybe he thought he could trap his own soul the way he trapped his victims. Over a century later, his body was exhumed for DNA testing. When they opened the grave, they found his body nearly perfectly preserved, thanks to the concrete, just as he'd wanted. The hotel was partially destroyed by fire shortly after his arrest and eventually demolished. Today, a post office stands where the murder castle once loomed. Some workers say the basement still gives them chills. Others have reported strange sounds. Whether it's haunted or not, no one really knows. But what we do know is this: H.H. Holmes wasn't just a serial killer. He was a master manipulator, a man who used trust, intelligence, and charm as his weapons. He didn't kill in rage. He killed in silence, smiling, calculating. And he built an entire building just to make people disappear. That's not just murder. That's something else. Something darker. Something that still chills us over 100 years later.